Very nice to sort of be there. Again, the screen's working out so I can see you in the Zendo. So that's nice. I'm used to just talking to the Hollywood squares. How much time do I have for the talk?
30, 40 minutes, whatever you.
Okay. Probably be 40, so make yourself comfortable, settle in. I wanted to talk a little bit about historically, a little bit the roots of Zen in America. We think kind of started in the late 60s and 70s, which is true. But before that, there was this book, a very old copy called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, was published in 1957. It's credited to Paul Reps, who was an artist and poet who lived in Asia, in the earlier part of the 1900s. But I want to talk about, he worked with a Zen teacher called Senzaki Roshi, who lived from 1876 to 1958. And this book came out in, this book was published in 1957, just before he died. So Senzaki came to San Francisco. He was a priest. He came with his teacher in 1905 for a conference, and his teacher left him in San Francisco. It's said because he was already very outspoken against Japanese imperialism, the wars in Asia, and that wasn't going to go over too well in Japan. But when his teacher left him in America, he said, in his early 20s, even though he was a priest and wanted to teach Buddhism, his teacher said, don't utter the B in Buddhism for 20 years. He thought he should mature more before he started teaching Zen. So after the 20 years, he created what was called the floating Zendo. It never formed an organization. And he also, but he'd rent a hall and he'd have chairs. He thought it was ridiculous for Americans to try to sit cross-legged on the floor. So we're talking, this is back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. Well, no, 20s and 30s. Robert Aitken studied with him. That's Robert Aitken's very influential in American Zen. But one episode I want to talk about is then in the 1940s, the Japanese Zen community in Los Angeles was sent to prison camps. Part of that is when they went back afterwards, they lost all their property. All their farms and houses were lost. So there was one of the camps was in Wyoming called Heart Mountain. So Senzaki Roshi was there, and so he had a pretty big Buddhist group in Wyoming at the camp. Also at that camp, well, then they would draft. The draft age men were drafted into the American Army, even though, but at Heart Mountain, 80 of them refused to be drafted. So they were put in worse prisons, taken away and put in worse prisons than Heart Mountain. At these internment camps, families were put in barracks. So families had to share quarters. So it's a pretty difficult part of American history. There's a book called American Sutra written by Duncan Williams, came out recently about that time. So then, Senzaki went back to Los Angeles and continued his floating Zendo for another 10 years and passed away. I just wanted to mention that history, but mainly what I want to do this morning is that we kind of take a bath, we kind of soak in about half a dozen of these very short classic Zen teachings. And they pretty much speak for themselves. So I read through them all. There's a lot I wouldn't even want to share. There's a lot of sometimes weird stuff in Zen that's a little violent and weird, but I picked out ones I really like and I organized them into sections. And this first section is about thieves, about the after robbery. Ryokan, a Zen master, lived the simplest kind of life in a little hut at the foot of a mountain. One evening, a thief visited the hut only to discover there was nothing in it to steal. Ryokan returned and caught him. He said, "You may have come a long way to visit me," he told the prowler. "You should not return empty-handed. Please take my clothes as a gift." The thief was bewildered. He took the clothes and slunk away. Ryokan sat naked, watching the moon. "Poor fellow," he mused. "I wish I could give him this beautiful moon." Well, I think it must have been summer if he sat there naked, but anyhow, there's a little over the top, but I wish I could give him this beautiful moon means I wish I could give him the ability to be satisfied with the beautiful moon. So from the story, I said, I wish I could give myself and our culture the ability to be satisfied with nature the way it is. And then perhaps we wouldn't destroy everything with too much consumption. The next thief story. One evening, as Shichiri Kojin was reciting sutras, a thief with a sharp sword entered, demanding either his money or his life. Shichiri told him, "Do not disturb me. You can find the money in that drawer." Then he resumed his recitation. A little while afterwards, he stopped and called, "Don't take it all. I need some to pay taxes with tomorrow." The intruder gathered up most of the money and started to leave. "Thank a person when you receive a gift," Shichiri added. The man thanked him and made off. A few days afterwards, the fellow was caught and confessed, among others, the offense against Shichiri. When Shichiri was called as a witness, he said, "This man is no thief, at least not as far as I'm concerned. I gave him the money and he thanked me for it." After he had finished his prison term, the man went to Shichiri and became his disciple. So I love stories with happy endings. And so, I really don't need to explain these stories. You can see how he took a bad situation and took control of it. When Bankei held his seclusion weeks of meditation, pupils from many parts of Japan came to attend. During one of these gatherings, a pupil was caught stealing. The matter was reported to Bankei with the request that the culprit be expelled. Bankei ignored the case. Later, the pupil was caught in a similar act, and again, Bankei disregarded the matter. This angered the other pupils, who drew up a petition asking for the dismissal of the thief, stating that otherwise they would leave in a body. They'd all leave if they don't kick out the thief. When Bankei had read the petition, he called everyone before him. "You are wise brothers," he told them. "You know what is right and what is not right. You may go somewhere else to study if you wish, but this poor brother does not even know right from wrong. Who will teach him if I do not? I'm going to keep him here even if all the rest of you leave. A torrent of tears cleansed the face of the brother who had stolen. All desire to steal had vanished. Once again, another very happy ending. So with these stories, we see that the teacher does not act as we would normally act. Very, very unusual. The next set is about death. Death is an important topic in Zen Buddhism. Tansen wrote 60 postcards on the last day of his life and asked an attendant to mail them. Then he passed away. The cards read, "I am departing from this world. This is my last announcement. Tanzan, July 27th, 1892. So, pretty matter of fact. Buddha told a parable in a sutra. A person traveling across a field encountered a tiger. They fled the tiger that was coming after them. Coming to a precipice, they caught hold of a root of a wild vine and swung themselves down over the edge. The tiger sniffed at him from above. Trembling, the person looked down to where far below another tiger was waiting to eat them. Only the vine sustained them. Two mice, one black and one white, little by little started to gnaw away the vine. The person saw a luscious strawberry near them. Grasping the vine with one hand, they plucked the strawberry with the other. How sweet it tasted. This is a very famous story. Some people use it as almost an intro to Zen Buddhism. Given our situation, that death is certain. How sweet many parts of life taste. And can we develop that appreciation? A rich man asked Sengai to write something for the continued prosperity of his family so it might be treasured from generation to generation. So this would be writing calligraphy. Sengai obtained a large sheet of paper and wrote, "Father dies, son dies, grandson dies." The rich man became angry. "I asked you to write something for the happiness of my family. Why do you make such a joke as this?" "No joke is intended," explained Senkai. "If before you yourself die, your son should die, this would grieve you greatly. If your grandson should pass away before your son, both of you would be brokenhearted. If your family, generation after generation, passes away in the order I have named, it will be the natural course of life. I call this real prosperity." Ikkyu, the Zen master, was very clever even as a boy. His teacher had a precious teacup, a rare antique. Ikkyu happened to break this cup and was greatly perplexed. Hearing the footsteps of his teacher, he held the pieces of the cup behind him. When the master appeared, Ikkyu asked, "Why do people have to die?" "This is natural," explained the older man. "Everything has to die and has just so long to live." Ikkyu, producing the shattered cup, added, "It was time for your cup to die." Pretty cute story. So yeah, a certain comfort with death, a certain, I believe, is one of the fruits of our practice. Okay, this section I call no delusion. Like to live with no delusion. The Zen master Hakuin was praised by his neighbors as one living a pure life. A beautiful Japanese girl whose parents owned a food store lived near him. Suddenly, without any warning, her parents discovered she was with child. This made her parents angry. She would not confess who the man was, but after much harassment, at last named Hakuin. In great anger, the parents went to the master. "Is that so?" is all he would say. "Is that so?" After the child was born, it was brought to Hakuin. By this time, he had lost his reputation, which did not trouble him. But he took very good care of the baby. He obtained milk from his neighbors and everything else the little one needed. A year later, the girl mother could stand it no longer. She told her parents the truth. The real father of the child was a young man who worked in the fish market. The mother and father of the girl at once went to Hakuin to ask forgiveness, to apologize at length, and to get the child back again. Hakuin was willing, and yielding the child, all he said was, "Is that so?" This story's always moved me because I like little babies, but it also seems very non-assertive. Like, is this, well, once again, these are stories, they're over the top, but they're meant to make us think of a little different way to be. A case of rather extreme equanimity. Ketchu, the great Zen teacher of the Meiji era, was head of Tofuku, a cathedral in Kyoto. One day, the governor of Kyoto called upon him for the first time. His attendant presented the card of the governor, which read, "Kitagaki, governor of Kyoto." "I have no business with such a fellow," said Kichu to his attendant. "Tell him to get out of here." The attendant carried the card back with apologies. "That was my error," said the governor, and with a pencil he scratched out the words, "Governor of Kyoto." "Ask your teacher again." "Oh, is it that Kitagaki?" exclaimed the teacher when he saw the card. "I want to see that fellow." I don't know what we do if the governor of Nebraska came to visit. They come to visit as a person, not as a position. Tetsugen, a devotee of Zen in Japan, decided to publish the sutras which at that time were available only in Chinese. The books were to be printed with wood blocks in an edition of 7,000 copies, a tremendous undertaking. Tetsugen began by traveling and collecting donations for this purpose. A few sympathizers would give him 100 pieces of gold, but most of the time he received only small coins. He thanked each donor with equal gratitude. After 10 years, Tetsugen had enough money to begin his task. It happened that at that time, the Uji River overflowed. Famine followed. Tetsugen took the funds he had collected for the books and spent them to save others from starvation. Then he began his work of collecting. Several years afterwards, an epidemic spread over the country. Tetsugen again gave away what he had collected to help his people. For a third time, he started his work, and after 20 years, his wish was fulfilled. The printing blocks which produced the first edition of the sutras can be seen today in the Obaku Monastery in Kyoto. The Japanese tell their children that Tetsugen made 3 sets of sutras, and that the first 2 invisible sets surpass even the last. So, helping alleviate suffering is most important. A nun who was searching for enlightenment made a statue of Buddha and covered it with gold leaf. Wherever she went, she carried this golden Buddha with her. Years passed, and still carrying her Buddha, the nun came to live in a small temple in a country where there were many Buddhas, each one with its own particular shrine. So these shrines were all together close by. The nun wished to burn incense before her golden Buddha. Not liking the idea of perfume straying to the others, she devised a funnel through which the smoke would ascend only to her statue. The blackened nose of the golden Buddha made it especially ugly. Fruits of selfishness. Thinking our Buddha is the best Buddha. The pupils of the Tendai school used to study meditation before Zen entered Japan. 4 of them, who were intimate friends, promised one another to observe 7 days of silence. On the first day, all were silent. Their meditation had begun auspiciously, but when night came, the oil lamps were growing dim. One of the pupils could not help exclaiming to a servant, "Fix those lamps." The second pupil was surprised to hear the first one talk. "We are not supposed to say a word," he remarked. "You 2 are stupid. Why did you talk?" asked the third. "I am the only one who has not talked," said the fourth. It's kind of funny. But I've seen places where we're in silence and then, or once I was at a Zen talk and a baby was making noise and the mother was, well, compassion for the mother, with mother's like, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. But anyhow, the corrective talking was more disturbing than the original sound. And without knowing it, we always say humans are different from our fellow mammals because we are hypocrites. So you can see how it's very easy to speak up when you have vowed not to. Okay, this next section is about teachers. I don't, what is a Zen teacher? How should they act? So here are some interesting stories. Zen students are with their masters at least 10 years before they presume to teach others. Nanin was visited by Tenno, who, having passed his apprenticeship, had become a teacher. The day happened to be rainy, so Tenno wore wooden clogs and carried an umbrella. After greeting him, Nanin remarked, "I suppose you left wooden clogs in the vestibule. I want to know if your umbrella is on the right or the left side of the clogs." Tenno, confused, had no instant answer. He realized he was unable to carry his Zen every minute. He became Nanin's pupil, and he studied 6 more years to accomplish his every minute Zen. So we say our practice is to constantly be mindful and well, I think it's important to always be a student and learn from other teachers. A soldier named Nobishiki came to Hwakuin and asked, "Is there really a paradise and a hell?" "Who are you?" inquired Hakuin. "I'm a samurai," the warrior replied. "You, a soldier?" exclaimed Hakuin. "What kind of ruler would have you as a guard? Your face looks like that of a beggar." Nobishiki became so angry that he began to draw his sword, but Hakuin continued, "So you have a sword? Your weapon is probably much too dull to cut off my head." As Nobishiki drew his sword, Hakuin remarked, "Here open the gates of hell." At these words, the samurai, perceiving the master's discipline, sheathed his sword and bowed. "Here open the gates of paradise," said Hakuin. I guess Zen teachers are brave. Okay. Two Zen teachers, Daigu and Gudo, were invited to visit a lord. Upon arriving, Gudo said to the Lord, "You are wise by nature and have inborn ability to learn Zen." "Nonsense," said Daigu. "Why do you flatter this blockhead? He may be a lord, but he doesn't know anything of Zen." So instead of building a temple for Gudo, the Lord built it for Daigu and studied Zen with him. Okay. Pretty interesting story for me, because I'm generally telling people, you are wise by nature. And ability to learn Zen and telling people, you are a blockhead. You don't know anything. Maybe I'd have a temple and be more successful if I was the latter. Anyhow, I love these stories. Yamoka Thesu, a young student of Zen, visited one master after another. He called upon Dokuan of Shokoku. Desiring to show his attainment, he said, "The mind, Buddha, and sentient beings, after all, do not exist. The true nature of phenomena is emptiness. There is no realization, no delusion, no sage, no mediocrity. There is no giving and nothing to be received." Dokuan, who was smoking quietly, said nothing. Suddenly, he whacked Yamoko with his bamboo pipe. This made the youth quite angry. "If nothing exists," inquired Dokuan, "where did this anger come from?" So this is pretty class. Now I've left out most of the Zen stories with the whacking, but anyhow. I heard a similar story, a modern story in the Hindu tradition. The student told his teacher he was, had acquired equanimity and things didn't upset him, but then they were going to lunch with the student's father. The teacher during the lunch kind of insulted the student's father. Afterwards, the student told the teacher how upset he was at the way he treated his father, and he just said, "You've gone past anger, huh?" Anyhow, teacher's willing to help us dig deep. Many pupils were studying meditation under Zen master Sengai. One of them used to arise at night, climb over the temple wall, and go to town on a pleasure jaunt. Sengai, inspecting the dormitory quarters, found this pupil missing one night and also discovered a high stool he used to scale the wall. Sengai removed the stool and stood there in its place. When the wanderer returned, not knowing that Sengai was the stool, he put his feet on the master's head and jumped down into the grounds. Discovering what he had done, he was aghast. Sengai said, "It is very chilly in the early morning. Do be careful not to catch cold yourself." The pupil never went out at night again. So once again, I thought of the story a lot. It just seems over the top with kind of a indirectness. Not telling the student, you shouldn't really go out at night, but just standing there, maybe for hours, so the student had the shock of his teacher knowing and caring. Very interesting story. So I'm on my last group of stories, which I call helpful stories. And these are all meant to be helpful, but Tanzan and Ekida were once traveling together down a muddy road. A heavy rain was still falling. Coming around a bend, they met a lovely girl in a silk kimono and sash, unable to cross the intersection. "Come on, girl," said Tanzan at once. Lifting her in his arms, he carried her over the mud. Ekido did not speak again until that night when they reached a lodging temple. When he could no longer restrain himself, said, "We monks do not go near females, especially not young and lovely ones. It is dangerous." "Why did you do that?" "I left the girl there," said Tanzan. "Are you still carrying her?" Very, very instructive story for us. When Banzan was walking through a market, he overheard a conversation between a butcher and his customer. "Give me the best piece of meat you have," said the customer. "Everything in my shop is the best," replied the butcher. "You cannot find any piece of meat here that is not the best." At these words, Banzan became enlightened. So, give up comparison. Everything. Every moment's the best, which this next one illustrates. The Lord asked Takuan, a Zen teacher, to suggest how he might pass the time. He felt his days were very long, attending his office and sitting stiffly to receive the homage of others. Ta Quan wrote 8 Chinese characters and gave them to the man. Not twice this day, inch time, foot gem. This day will not come again. Each minute is worth a priceless gem. So I've heard the saying, an inch of time is a foot of jade. So time is our life. Time is what we have. It is very precious. Okay, there's 2 more. This next is kind of a list of suggestions. If I think if do even one of them, it'd be pretty helpful. These were, people say, what is Zen? The Zen golfs and jewelry and spas, Because Zen is a practice. And here are some, well, Zen has many practices. So and Shaku, once again, a very early Zen teacher in America, had the following rules, which he practiced every day of his life. In the morning, before dressing, light incense and meditate. Retire at a regular hour. Partake of food at regular intervals. Eat with moderation and never to the point of satisfaction. Receive a guest with the same attitude you have when alone. When alone, maintain the same attitude you have in receiving guests. Watch what you say, and whatever you say, practice it. When an opportunity comes, do not let it pass by, yet always think twice before acting. Do not regret the past, look to the future. Have the fearless attitude of a hero and the loving heart of a child. Upon retiring, sleep as if you have entered your last sleep. Upon awakening, leave your bed behind you instantly, as if you had cast away a pair of old shoes. So I do very few of these, but they are, well, each one is something to consider. Now, if we have the practice of waking up and then reciting the waking up gata, and then getting up. The rhythm of life, of course, we have times to totally daydream. Of course, we have times to totally relax, but in general, especially if you can start your day and throughout the day, just keep moving with the rhythm of life. And the last story is funny. Provided he makes and wins an argument about Buddhism with those who live there, any wandering monk can remain in a Zen temple. If he is defeated, he has to move on. In a temple in the northern part of Japan, 2 brother monks were dwelling together. The elder one was learned, but the younger one was stupid and had but one eye. A wandering monk came and asked for lodging, properly challenging them to a debate about the sublime teaching. The elder brother, tired from that day of much studying, told the younger one to take his place. Go and request the dialogue in silence, he cautioned. So the young monk and the stranger went to the shrine and sat down. Shortly afterwards, the traveler rose and went to the elder brother and said, "Your young brother is a wonderful fellow. He defeated me." "Relate the dialogue to me," said the elder one. "Well," explained the traveler, "first I held up one finger representing Buddha, the enlightened one. So he held up two fingers signifying Buddha and his teaching. I held up three fingers representing the Buddha, his teaching, and his followers living the harmonious life. Then he shook his clenched fist in my face, indicating that all three come from one realization. Thus he won, and so I have no right to remain here." With this, the traveler left. "Where is that fellow?" the younger one asked, running into his elder brother. "I understand you won the debate." "Won nothing. I'm going to beat him up." "Tell me the subject of the debate," asked the other one. "Why, the minute he saw me, he held up one finger, insulting me by insinuating that I have only one eye. Since he was a stranger, I thought I would be polite to him, and I held up two fingers, congratulating him that he has two eyes. Then the impolite wretch held up three fingers, suggesting that between us we have only three eyes. So I got mad and started to punch him. He ran out and ended it." Okay. How many people had heard some of these stories before? Okay, not that many of these. These are classic, and it's pretty nice to have a short story that instructs us. Any story anyone would like to discuss? Anyone you really liked or really hated?
Which one did you like, Cliff?
Oh, I like so many of these. Oh, the governor crossing out his title. The priest, the dying, just sending out postcards. This is my last announcement. It's kind of so short and so not very obvious. But the two, I kind of mentioned the two of Hakuin accepting the baby. Is that so? People are a little upset that he could just return a baby after a year. And then the teacher that replaced the stool. In a way, I like those stories because they bother me. That is, well, is Japanese culture. So I tend to be rather, kind of conflict avoidance. Well, okay. I don't know a lot about Japanese culture, but I observed Katagiri Roshi. I've observed Shahaku Okamura a little bit. I went to Japan. I've heard about Japanese culture a little bit, and I make a little bit of a parody. I have this saying, "What part of yes means no, don't you understand?" That just so polite and so subtle. Like, you're really supposed to know this. I'm not going to kind of point out your error, I'm just going to. And then, psychological, but so in America, we call that passive aggressive. Like you're not communicating directly. You're just you know, going along to get along, and you're just treating people kindly and ahead of what seems to be truth. So both personally and looking at Zen coming from Japan to America, that's a very alive question for me. Yeah, there's a story. There was other Zen centers have these tans, pretty common that you get up on the tan and sit. So there was a center like that in California. And after sitting, you get off the tan and stand on the floor. But a woman, she was brand new. And so when sitting was over, she stood up on the tan. So she's standing like 2 feet above everybody. And then she realizes her mistake and got off the tan. But she was so impressed that nobody looked at her, nobody corrected her. It's like, you're not supposed to stand on the tan. It was just obvious. And so, being able to learn without being corrected, she just thought Zen is great. These people are like, they can accept, a mistake in equanimity. So that's a little bit of the Japanese approach. We just do it. There's this interesting book, a young woman who was in traditional Japan monasteries at a young age. It's called Bow First, Ask Questions Later. But it's a question, does that work? Or, well, Zen attracts so few people. And you are all so special, we don't know what would make it click. Some people say, we all got to wear name tags. And other people say, I would never go to a group that made me wear name tags. So these are kind of live questions for me. How much of Japanese culture might be inappropriate for, what kind of American Buddhism are we creating? Which I think is very good to have just as an open question and not worry about it too much, because many groups are trying many different things. But it's a bit serendipitous as to whether a center is, but this is kind of my view, but it might be a little passive, whether a center is lucky enough to attract just very motivated person that really helps the center. So, okay, I'll be a little strict Zen teacher here. I would propose those motivated people are you. So.
I wonder if Senzaki, having lived in the United States, having come from Japan and lived in the United States for most of his life, I wonder how he addressed this question, how to meld these cultural differences.
Yeah, he was very isolated. So he did what he felt was right, which was interesting. Maybe yoga hadn't hit America yet and people weren't flexible, but his decision to have people sit in chairs. But you could say, no center, he had no successor, he had no center developed, but he kept teaching throughout his life. And then I'm not sure Paul Reps could have done this book without him. So it really, we don't know who. So I think what we're doing, we're adding Zen Buddhism to our culture. So when people just attend a few times and don't come back. I'm still kind of have this faith that, they took something with them. We're just by existing and continuing, whether we're big or small, we affect American culture. But you can argue with me, anybody.
I like that. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Jodo?
No, this is great to, yeah, I was afraid you'd be a little small part of my screen, but I see you all as if I'm sitting there, and it's really nice to see George, and I won't embarrass myself trying to remember your names exactly. So nice to see you again.
You too.
Yeah,
And
you
we'd
too,
love to have you come back and
Yeah.
visit us sometime.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's always, when I go back to the Midwest, should I drive or should I fly? And driving and visiting you, I certainly hope to do that soon.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Before we do the closing chant, just a couple of announcements. We do have a sesshin coming up this weekend. It says 3 days. It's really more like 2. It's a half day on Friday, full day on Saturday, half day on Sunday, which actually includes Sunday open Zen. So not too daunting a schedule. And tonight or today is the last day to register. So if you're interested in it, please go on the website and sign up. After this, we'll have about 15 minutes for tea and conversation, and we're going to have work practice and do some cleaning in the temple. So, closing chant, call and response. The many beings are numberless, bowing to carry them across.
The many beings are numberless, bowing to carry them across.
Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, vowing to cut off the mind road.
Greed, anger, and ignorance rise endlessly, vowing to cut off the mind road.
Dharma gates are countless, vowing to wake to them all.
Dharma gates are countless, bowing to wake to them all.
Buddha's way is all embracing, vowing to follow through.
Buddha's way is all embracing, vowing to follow through.
Thank you again, Jodo.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you.
If you'll brush your cushions and put them back in place, and we'll bow out. Yep.